you doing? And a very warm welcome back to youtube.com/Wi-Fi Sheep with me, Tom. And this, the second in our new series, Going GUI. If you don't know what it's about, do go and check episode 1. But basically, I am preparing a series of retro and emulated vintage hardware computer systems in a view of exhibiting at this year's Cambridge Retro Computer Festival. Details should be on your screen right now, and you need to head over to computinghistory.org.uk, and tickets are now open for both the Saturday the 9th and Sunday the 10th. It's going to be an absolutely fantastic weekend and I'm really looking forward to it. But if you intend to visit, you will need to book in advance. This event last year, I didn't go last year, and I know many of you were disappointed, but I didn't go last year, but I was told that last year it hit capacity. So if you want to guarantee you can actually get into the venue, then you need to book tickets in advance. Prices are on screen now. Please do book in advance. There's no guarantee if you show up on the day you'll be able to get admission. Anyway, my idea for content to exhibit at this year's Retro Computer Festival is entitled Going GUI, hence the series we're doing here on YouTube, where we're looking at vintage click and point graphical user interfaces, or GUIs, for a number of retro computing platforms. These were platforms that attempted to mimic the Macintosh, whilst giving users not necessarily a full operating system, but a graphical user shell at the very least, that sat over the top of their existing computer platform. In the first video we looked at GEOS, or GEOS, for the Commodore 64. We didn't have a real Commodore 64, but we emulated it using the C64, or the 64 Maxi, full-size replica clone type system. Well, today we're going to look at some actual real vintage hardware in the form of this. I've got the camera set to the widest possible angle, hence why it's got some strange fisheye curving going on, but this is an Acorn BBC Micro Model B. One of the first I actually picked up when I first got back into having BBC Micros, and this particular machine was refurbished 2 years ago and did go back out on show, and it went to the Centre of Computer History for their 1982 weekend, and it exhibited along with another Model B, and for that I did a few changes and freshened up, and it hasn't been refurbished since, but it's back here today as the plan is to take this particular machine along to this year's 2024's main exhibition. Now, graphical user interfaces for the BBC Micro. Now, if you're not familiar with the BBC Micro, it's a 6502 based 2 MHz 8-bit computer, and the stock Model Bs came with 32K of RAM. There was an earlier version called the Model A, which was stripped down and had 16K, and there was a later Model B Plus, which I think went up to either 64 or 128K. Mine is the more common and stock Model B, which first appeared in 1981 and was discontinued around 1985-1986. Now, regulars to the channel might now be questioning, hang on a minute Tom, you showed us a graphical user interface running on a BBC, and you're right, I did. Quite a few years ago now, we did a video looking at GEM, that's GEM, the 16-bit PC x86 operating system, which I had running on a BBC Master system. So that particular BBC Master had what's called a PiTube Direct, which is a Raspberry Pi powered add-on fitted to its tube interface. This basically meant the computer could hand over all operations to the Pi, and the Pi then ran and emulated 286, and then we were able to run the software through the machine. This is not a million miles away from how the original BBC Master 512 worked, where it had a full PC MS-DOS card actually fitted inside the machine. So the 6502 native processor just handed over to the Intel chip, and that ran the system on the original hardware, the Pi replacing that in this version that we showed you. So yes, it's interesting, and I might take that rig back along to the show. I haven't decided yet, but it wasn't running natively on the actual Beeb hardware. What I want to show you today does run and is running natively on the original BBC Micro Model B hardware. Now, the BBC Micro did have a mouse and point and click system which came later on. It was never original to the machine. The BBC Micro, like many of the 80s Micros, was a keyboard only system. Mice came out around 85, or a little bit early, maybe 84, and this is one of the more common ones. This is the AMX mouse, which was a third-party add-on that plugs underneath the machine into its user port. And in order for this to work, you had to have an AMX ROM, a physical EEPROM chip that had to be installed inside any micro that you wanted to use AMX with, and the software was then loaded off floppy disk. So for this setup, the machine is pretty much stock. I do, however, have a floppy emulator. So this is a USB based floppy emulator box. It's attached via traditional 34-pin ribbon connector and power supply to the BBC Micro. The BBC Micro has its original Intel floppy controller. This one has it installed, and it has the floppy disk or DFS disk filing system EEPROMs fitted as well. So as far as this real hardware is aware, it will see this as a real 5¼ inch floppy disk. However, just for ease and convenience, we're actually going to be loading software or disk images straight from FAT formatted USB stick, which we'll put into there, and then that allows images to be read and loaded as if they were native disks onto the real hardware. Also, just hiding off camera, I think I can just bring that into shot for you. Here we go. I have one of these relatively cheap HD video converter units, and I'm going from DIN, 6-pin DIN RGB, which is just here, into SCART, and then we're going from SCART RGB to 720p HDMI, which is going through a capture card, and hence you'll be able to get a clear HD output from the real hardware. These boxes, by the way, are quite good, but they do suffer from a bit of a lag, which is fine for what we're going to do today. But if you were trying to play a game, the lag can be really problematic, and you kind of can miss things because there's a delay between what you're seeing on video and when the machine is in reality. Anyway, right, so let's see about getting some software. Just before we continue, I'll just show you the AMX mouse wiki. So this was the original mouse, which was a little bit different. Mine is a later revision. But you can see here the connector I was talking about, which is the user port, almost ribbon style connector, but obviously it's not using a ribbon cable. Now, on the hunt for software, I came across this site, which I'll link in the description. This is mybbcmaster.nl, so it's from the Netherlands. And it actually contains a number of AMX utilities and disk images. And what I'm interested in today is AMX Desk and Max, and here we have some downloads for AMX Desk. This is AMX Desktop version 1 and version 1.03, and you can see here a very nice little chart that tells you it's compatible with the Model B and the B+, and there's also SSD disk images, so we can click to download this disk image. BBC Micro disk images, by the way, are 200k each, because that was the file format for the SSD discs, so they're not big by any stretch of imagination. Okay, so we've downloaded that. Now what we should be able to do is, if I just take my USB stick, I'm going to plug it in to the computer. Okay, we go to downloads. There is the disk image .ssd, so we'll cut that from there. And on the data stick, you see I've already got some files already on here, so we'll just paste that in. There we go. Yeah, we'll just replace. I've already got a version of this already running, so we'll just take that off. There we go. And I did have the earlier version here that we will actually delete. I've also got a number of other utilities on here as well. What I will do is just going to go back to my documents. I've been creating a little BBC dev folder, and I've got a blank .ssd disk image, which is the standard BBC Micro single-sided disk. That's what SSD stands for. And I'm just going to put a blank disk on, because sometimes you need to write files. There we go. So a blank file on its own is just 3K. But you can see these disks are either 100 or 200K in file volume or size. And that's totally normal for a BBC Micro floppy disk. Right, let's get that ejected. Put the disk, or the USB drive rather, into the GoTech. The mouse, by the way, the mouse is ball driven as you'd expect. Now, I've had a slight issue with, this is the original mouse ball, if I just show you on camera. This is starting to go sticky. I have had to clean this with white spirit just to take the stickiness off, but it's only a quick fix and it's beginning to get sticky again. So a replacement ball is going to be needed, and we'll probably have to follow that up in another video. To make these work at all, you kind of need a good fabric mouse mat. They don't like to run on the desk. So those of you that remember the ball mice, even from the 90s, you always had to have a fabric mouse mat to make that work. And it's all right, but it squeaks a little bit, ironically, for a mouse. So let's see if we can actually boot the system up. One thing I like to do with these is when I take these out, and I've done school workshops and things, and I usually say, especially if I'm sort of teaching to kids, of course, who have no idea about these systems, because it's way, way before their time, I say, how long do you think it takes to boot this computer up? And they go, oh, it's really ancient, so it must take ages to boot. And you literally turn it on the dog switch at the back, and you go, there, done. And you can see it's actually come up on the little HD LCD display that I'm using here. So a very modern display, and you should be able to see it there in pure capture. So you're looking at the raw image coming off, which is surprisingly good. Now, this particular machine, you may have noticed, has quite a lot installed. So we've got FloppyWise ROM installed. These are all the external drivers. The AMX Super ROM is installed. We have the Acorn DFS, that's the filing system, and we also have the basic BBC Basic interpreter, which it loads into as stock standard, and that is the basic prompt awaiting an instruction. If I hit break once, you'll see that it clears a little bit and just shows all the drivers installed in the system. So if I now catalogue the disk, so without touching, we just go back, there we are, without touching any of the controls, we've got 000 here on the GoTech. That should be image 1, and we can now just check what image 1 actually is. So we go *C dot, and you can see desk version 1.2 is the first that has come up. So we should be able to boot this by going shift, break, and let go. And it now loads in. So this is AMS Desk, or AMX Desk rather, by Elliott Software Limited, and I believe this is around 1985. So enter today's date. Do I dare attempt today's date? I don't know. I don't even know what today's date is. Hang on. So shall we try 14 of the 7th? I don't know if it's Y2K compatible. We can try 2024. Enter a time. Should we do the time as I have at the moment, which is 15. Oops. 15. 11. And we'll say 00. And now we'll see if we're going to boot. Oh. Okay, so we got somewhere. We appear to have crashed. System error. Didn't like something. Okay. I wonder if, because I've got a number of ROMs installed on this, I wonder if AMX needs all the space, because obviously you have ROMs loaded, they load up and they take a little bit of RAM. We've got 32k of RAM, 10k is already gone on that video mode it used, which is mode 4 for anyone who's interested, 1 bit. It's like mode 1, but it's a 1-bit colour, black and white. So I do wonder if maybe FloppyWise might be sitting in some space that this OS needs, or it doesn't like the FloppyWise copy ROM. FloppyWise is a way of copying or getting around copy protection to copy disks that had copy protection. So, okay, let's power down. So if we're going to look at drivers, and that's the first thing I'd always go, if you're having strange errors, it could either be the disk is faulty, the disk images don't work properly, or it could be something unique with your hardware. So BBC Micro, normally it has a number of screws hitting or holding it in. A lot of us that own Beebs, especially if they don't go out, generally don't have the screws in, so you can lift the lid clean off. Here we go inside. So I said it was a real one. You might remember I did the video when I refurbished this machine 2 years ago, and I had to put a new, or I say new, a replacement ULA video decoder chip in because it had started to fry the chip. These get very hot and are going bad in their 45th year of operation. This one was okay, so I've put it in, and I added some Raspberry Pi heat sinks to the top of it just to try and keep it a little bit cool. And it's actually not doing too bad. But anyway, yes, right, ROMs. So I've taken that bolt out. There's 2 bolts either side here and here. And here's one. And this holds the keyboard in. So nice thing I like about BBC Micros is when you talk about, oh, how do you install drivers? You install drivers with a screwdriver. So if I now lift the keyboard and just take it off and hinge it to one side, you'll see there is 5 slots and a row of 5 EEPROMs. Right, I've zoomed in a little bit. Sorry about the slightly skew angle, but here are the ROMs. If we see I have a full set installed, so the 5 EEPROM slot spaces. So basically it goes operating system, basic interpreter, DFS 0.9, so that's the disk filing system. By the way, the floppy controller, the Intel marked part, is actually here. Then we have the AMX ROM. This is the ROM which actually the sticker is moved and it's partially showing the windows. That kind of needs covering back up. But this is the ROM that's needed, 16K ROM that's needed to drive the mouse. And then this one on the end is the floppy-wise, or what was like a slightly hooky version, which I did not make, of the floppy-wise. So with a flat-headed screwdriver, just think I've got a bigger one, don't think I do, so we'll use this one. Flat-headed screwdriver. And we just very, very carefully just loosen the IC out without bending all the pins. There we go. We've uninstalled those drivers from the machine, so we now have a blank space. That's fine. So we'll pop the screws back in later on, but let's just take that off and I'll put the lid back on. Okay, let's power back up. And you can see that floppy-wise has now disappeared. So we've just got the AMX, the Acorn DFS and the basic running. Hit break, there we go, tidies it up a little bit. So AMX Super ROM, Acorn DFS and basic. Now let's just check, make sure we're on disk 1 still. We are, there we go. By the way, so star C is the same as going star cat, which would be kind of the same as doing a dir in a DOS or an ls in Linux or a Unix. So just basically list the directory of the floppy. Okay, so let's go shift and break. Let's try again. Okay, today's date, so 14 July 2024. Again, we don't know if this is Y2K compliant, but we'll give it a shot. Time is now 15:18:00. Okay, interesting. Didn't go star key this time. Oh, there we go. That's actually looking much happier. It hasn't crashed this time, so it was that ROM that was conflicting. So that's one thing to watch if you want to try and replicate any of this stuff, is to make sure that your hardware is not full of conflicting third-party add-ons. So I've got my mouse here, and we'll see how well that works. And here we are. That is a point-and-click desktop. And that mouse is very, very slow at best. And this is the slight thing with the AMX mouse, is that it's real time in ball movement to the user. So you can't set the mouse or the cursor to go faster or slower. So you can hear the squeak of the mouse now. So for example, if I want to go track over here, I quite literally have to move pick up the mouse, move, pick up the mouse, move, and back again, move, pick up the mouse. I sort of do this movement because I can't sweep from one end to the other. And even the system we used over on the C64 for GOS actually fixed this issue. But here on AMX, it's very much the case of scroll up, scroll down, back again. So yeah. Anyway, so welcome to the desktop environment of AMX Desk. So this is running natively on the 6502 BBC Micro Model B with 32K of RAM. And we have a kind of very Macintosh copycat-esque operating system with a desktop. We have menus that we can click, hold. And it's very Apple-esque. A little mouse replaces what would have been the Apple. And I can select help. And you can actually have dialogues. There we are, copyright 85, 1985, Elliott Software, David Elliott, version 1.03. And we even have dialogues that we can click to confirm. Now we have a number of icons. So we have a clock, which just removes the time up here. The time doesn't do anything. So we can click that on, off. Not sure what 1, 2 does. Let's have a look. Ah, there we are. That answers the question. Did it cope with 2024? The answer is no, it didn't. It's defaulted to 1986. So this is a calendar. And see how it pops it into a sort of pseudo window. Not really going any further than the 31st of December 1986, and then you can add something. So what was I doing a year before my birth? Not sure. I don't know. Sleeping? We do have a copy and paste option. We also have a clear option. So I don't, can we? I don't know if we can. So the cursor keys on the BBC Micro don't do anything, but okay. So we'll quit. So that was a calendar. It is slow because obviously being a disk-based operating system, it is slow. We've got a printer driver. I'm assuming that's for memos. Yeah, so let's say sheep. Nope, disk is full, which is kind of why we need a blank disk. So let's, can we just click off that? No. So we can go File, quit again. Let's take a look at drive 0, which is the only drive we've actually got populated on here. And that is in visual format, the contents of the disk, same as what we doing a starcat or starc command that we did previous. The windows, by the way, don't drag, don't resize. They just come into this sort of fixed space. And just by clicking anything in the bar, closes the window. There is a memo document there, so we should be able to click, and can we? There's no click and drag, so I wonder, do we just click delete? Where's the click and drag? No, there's no click and drag. And if you click it again, it opens the only text documents on the disk, and you can read for yourself. This is an example of a memo written using the memo pad. So very simple text editor. quit. I'll say back to the disk. And we have confusingly what looks like a folder, but if you double click it, you actually get setup systems. So we can, for example, we don't have a drive 1, 2 or 3 installed. TV mode will lead to interface. We can even shift the display up and down if we needed to. We'll leave it where it is. We'll hit complete. And you see how it says complete, but it's now taken us out of the graphic user interface and it's just leaving us with the basic shell. So we could see cat again. But if I now go shift and break to boot back in, doesn't ask us for time and date because we set that, and it's now done our setup, and we now have a single drive, which we can see here. So now if I go back to, or go, I should say GoTech really, and hit the button so it says 1 on the drive, click drive 0 again, and it now loads in a totally new image. So the operating system that we loaded off the first disk has stayed in RAM and is still running. And the second disk here, we now have, this is AMX Art, and you'll notice there is a little application here that says Art. If I double click this, we should seamlessly run into the AMX Art software, and this is the original version anyway, is a 1-bit black and white clone of Mac Paint. So it's very similar to Mac Paint how it works, and you've got the spray can, and I can use the mouse to paint, and I can even paint, select patterns and paint patterns, much as we did with the Windows paints and things I remember from my youth. Admittedly we had a few more colours, and I have got a version of I think it's AMX Super Art that actually managed to run with 4 colours, and it kind of created a pseudo yellow on the BBC Micro by mixing, I think there's a matrix of red and green together, and it created a sort of almost look-alike yellow. Again, a little bit of PAL artifacting. You couldn't do NTSC artifacting because this isn't an NTSC machine, but you could attempt PAL artifacting, which is what it did. So this is the Paint program, which there we go. And we can even put some text in. So this is, can we have lowercase? We can. There we go. Oh, we need to press execute, which is that button. Execute button is the same as left mouse click. So I can have some text. Can't have many text options, but I can put text on the screen, and it should be able to rub out. Oh, beg your pardon, I do have some very basic text options like bold, very bold, italic. Cancel is down the bottom. Line. And again, if you want to get off these menus, you have to click cancel at the bottom. There we go to option at the other side. And you can load, save, and it does actually have a print option as well, which is impressive for the time. So that's AMX art, which looks so Macintosh-esque. And again, how Apple didn't sue. I guess maybe AMX was just too small a thing in Britain, that it didn't have an international appeal, so it wasn't worth going after. But this stuff looks so similar to the Macintosh. It's almost what the Macintosh could have looked like and felt like with resolution had it not got the Motorola 68032-bit CPU but had stayed with the original Motorola 6809. Then it could have very much ended up looking like we're seeing here with the AMX system on the 8-bit. Remember, the Macintosh in 1979 was going to be an 8-bit computer running the 6809. It gives you an idea of what it might have looked like had history been very different. You're probably wondering, how do we get back to the main desk environment, or I keep trying to call it an OS. It's not an OS. This is purely a shell that sits on top of the MOS, or machine operating system, of the Acorn BBC Micro. But how do we get back to that desktop? Because there's no clear way of doing that from the menus. Well, unfortunately, the only way I figured out how to do it, and it's quite crude and shows you how incomplete and disconnected this all was, is on the actual machine itself. There's the brake key. You press the brake key once, then over on the GoTech or the floppy EMU, back to disk 0, back to the machine. We can hold down shift, press brake once, let go, and we have to come straight back in again. There we go. So you can kind of seamlessly switch one way, but unfortunately you can't kind of seamlessly switch back the other way, which something Gem on the BBC Master did do. If you opened the program, it would actually go back to the desktop straight after. Of course, we don't just have to look at AMX compatible software. There is other stuff we could look at. So I've just switched to disk 7. Let's just see if that's the correct disk. That's 3D Pool, which we could try. So if we wanted to try and load 3D Pool, so this is just a standard BBC Micro game on a standard BBC Micro disk image. It's nothing to do with the AMX. It's not AMX compatible, but here it is, the disk, and we have a boot file, 3D load, 3D Pool, and a folder directory here. And that went a bit crunchy, didn't it? And that's just me space. But it does actually get going, and this is 3D Pool. 1989 was a very late entry for the BBC Micro, probably one of the last commercial programs available. It was also quite impressive, being one of the first sort of flat rendered 3D games. Again, nothing to do with AMX. This is always a one I kind of like to show people, as it really does show the power of the machine, all things considered. Also, how it manages to run an entire pool game in just 4-color mode, and you have the pool game of dark red and light red balls, and that would be player 2. If we were playing. So it's quite crude, but at the same time it's also quite impressive. We'll probably come back and look at 3D games on the Beeb at a later date. Right, I'm back at the desktop, and I'm just going to load virtually another floppy image. Disk 6. Disk 6, here it is, Elite. This should be the folder. So let's see if Classic Elite for the BBC Micro will actually boot here from AMX Desktop. So far so good. And it will. See if we can get launching. Sadly, no AMX support here. Just trying to remember my controls again. There we go. But Elite, for those of you who don't know, is actually one of the very first full wireframe 3D open world space trading pirate dogfight type simulators with this docking system that sort of doesn't quite work. Elite was obviously ported to many systems and has had a relatively modern reboot in the past few years through Elite Dangerous. But this here is the original for the BBC Micro. Again, another example of 3D games on the system. Okay, so that is just a very brief overview of the AMX Desk or AMX Desktop system running natively for the Acorn BBC Micro, and also included the AMX third-party free button mouse. It's interesting how this particular mouse, which was the later revision of the design, very much inspired what became the Acorn Archimedes mouse. This was the first official free button mouse that Acorn ever made, and it's for their next generation of ARM-based Archimedes that replaced the BBC Micro. And it's just very interesting to see how they took a number of design cues from the original and the last of the AMX type. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this interesting look into the world of graphic user interfaces for the BBC Micro. If you want to play with this particular machine and the AMX mouse, do come along to the Centre for Computing History for the Retro Computer Festival Cambridge 2024, November the 9th and 10th 2024. The details and links are in the description to this video. Please stay tuned, as in a moment we'll say thank you to all the wonderful Patreon and YouTube channel members that make all this possible. If you haven't done so already, please do consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you real soon right here on the channel. Until next time, bye for now.